Are you ready to get your health back but feel overwhelmed by the endless healthcare options? We believe God has called each of us to a specific assignment, and we want to make sure your body, mind, and heart are up for the task. It's time to simplify the process of healing. At Cornerstone Integrative Healing, we offer simple, effective, easy ways to prioritize your health and gain understanding. No prescription pad needed. I'm Kari Coody, a pharmacist turned integrative health practitioner. I'm so excited to have these conversations around topics with my friend, Jenn.
Hi there, I'm Jenn, and together with our team at Cornerstone Integrative Healing, we offer an alternative to traditional healthcare, combining our expertise and experience in the medical field with our knowledge and faith to break the cycles of guessing what's wrong. We know the road to healing, feeling good again, can be overwhelming. You can expect honest conversations around the ups and downs of healing. The truth is, there are so many layers to healing. Because we've taken the time to learn where true healing comes from, we've learned how to help other women to discover a different way of caring for themselves. Join us every week for new episodes as we discuss topics that are personal and pertinent to your healing journey.
Welcome, everybody, back into the podcast. It's Kari and Jenn here, and we are diving into a highly requested topic, one that a lot of people shy away from talking about, but we felt like it was really important to do an episode on this topic because it's just important to have more information to feel confident in your decisions around this topic, which is vaccines. And I know that I've been asked many, many, many times, as well, I'm sure as Jenn has, about my opinion and just where can people get more information, make informed decisions about this, et cetera. So we thought putting together some information for this podcast and, just getting the word out there to start the conversation was important. So, Jenn, do you want to just kind of jump in with maybe some of your thoughts and some information?
Yeah. So I just want to say a quick note that this podcast or episode really isn't to sway you one way or another, right? This is just to present some facts, to inform, to give you just some informed decision making, right? And discernment, because it's hard. You want to do the right thing for your child. And that could be different for everybody. So I just want people to keep that in mind. And really talk about like the difference between anti-vaccine and pro-informed consent, right? So that is knowing what all the risks and benefits are of something before making a decision. So I know personally, my kids are not vaccinated, and there is an emotional side to that. 20 years ago, I didn't really talk about it much. It wasn't understood. There was some fear and judgment around that. But I did my research before I decided not to vaccinate. I read probably 6 or 7 books. I interviewed 2 pediatricians. I listened to probably 10 webinars before I decided not to do that. So I was well prepared. I had the information that I needed to make that decision. But I think what is happening is there's some censorship that has led to mistrust. And so what we want to do is just open that conversation so that you're able to see what the information is so that you can make a true informed consent about what vaccines actually are, how they're studied, how they're monitored, what are the long-term and the short-term risks, et cetera. So this is a personal health decision. It's not just a blanket recommendation, I think. It's really based on your family, your child, and something that a decision you make between parents.
Yeah. And so this is not medical advice.
Nope. It is not.
And I think that
these are opinions only.
Yes. And some facts, right? We're sharing some facts and just so that you can so that you can make your own decision. I think as we go into this topic and we are going to share facts, et cetera, but I felt really convicted several years ago that I didn't want to make a decision solely because of fear. And a lot of the information surrounding, vaccines is fear-based. And just I don't find that a good reason to make a decision and to do something based on fear. Just to share really quickly my story. So when I had my first daughter, I wanted to follow like a delayed schedule. So I actually did vaccinate her, but it was very spread out, and there weren't as many vaccines. There's been several even added from when she was born 13 years ago. And so I was doing the delayed schedule with her, and then my son was born. I followed even a more delayed schedule with him, and he actually had a reaction to the MMR vaccine. And so that was the end of that. So I think that, yeah, everybody's story is a little bit different. And so we're sharing ours just to share, right? I think it's so important to have a conversation around this. We don't, like Jen said, we don't want to sway you one way or another. We just want to share and open this door of conversation. So with that being said,
Yes.
Jen, I know that you did a lot of research for this.
Well,
podcast.
I've sort of, being in the industry for a long time, I've been exposed to seminars and different doctors. Dr. Sherry Tenpenny, who's kind of a renowned anti-vaxxer, is local to us. I've seen her speak several times. And so I just was lucky enough to have that opportunity to just look at all the information, right? So, first and foremost, we all know, and we've heard this recently, is that, excuse me, the autism rates are skyrocketing. So in 1970, the autism rate was 1 in 10,000. Currently, it's 1 in 31. So, that increase is astronomical. So there's 2 really good studies by some of the best epidemiologists out in California that show there was only a small fraction of a rise in the autism rates due to, changing diagnostic criteria. So what does that mean? That just means so they've changed the diagnostic criteria to maybe be more inclusive, right, to a couple things. So there's only been a really small fraction, according to these epidemiologists. So we can't contribute the rising rate to the change in the diagnostic criteria is basically what that says. Okay. A lot of these studies showed basically that there is a higher incidence, obviously, a large study that was well conducted in 2006. And again, you have to be careful about studies. And I'm going to just give my 2 cents on studies. For every one study that I can find that says one thing, I can find 10 studies that say the exact opposite. So you have to look at 1, who's funding the study. 2, is there any financial connections to the scientists who are conducting the study? Who have they worked for in the past? Who do they currently work for? What boards do they sit on? That's all really important. Okay. And it's hard for people to find impartiality, especially scientists and doctors who are in mainstream, because they are under a lot of scrutiny to lose their job. So that's one of the main studies that is very circulated at the moment. That was a study done by the Henry Ford health system. It was an insurance plan in Michigan. They looked at 18,000 children, vaccinated versus unvaccinated. So before this time, when looking at studies, there was no true control in a vaccine versus unvaccinated child. So the quote unquote unvaccinated, they were still giving them adjuvants, right? So like the aluminum mercury based without the attenuated virus, bacteria, etc. So there was no true control, right, of the 22 studies that were looking at vaccinated versus unvaccinated. So this was a retro study looking at children who had been vaccinated versus those who had truly never received adjuvants or anything in the past. And by the way, there's a great documentary on this. It's called An Inconvenient Study. This study was supposed to be published. It was never published for fear of the scientists who conducted the evaluation based on the Henry Ford's, healthcare system, that there would be ramifications for them, for their career, for their job, et cetera. So
I think that says a lot in itself.
Yes.
Why do people want people dead that do the actual real digging for this stuff, right?
Yes.
That should say a lot.
Yes, unfortunately. And the inconvenient study gets into all of that. They talk to the scientists directly, and I would assume he doesn't know he's being interviewed. It's like hidden cameras.
Right.
It's kind of crazy, unfortunately. But in those findings, what they found was the kids that were vaccinated, couple things. So the autism rate in the unvaccinated was severely less than in the unvaccinated. So that's chronic illness, mostly. So it was 1 in 115 kids versus 1 in 31 who were vaccinated. So not severe, the rate of chronic disease was very high. So they saw, increases in autism 4 times that in those that were vaccinated, 3 times in those that were vaccinated to have any sort of what they call atopic disease. So that just includes like a number of allergic conditions.
Mhm.
Almost a 6 times increase in autoimmune disease and a 5.5 time increase in neurodevelopmental disorders, which includes, but not limited to, autism. That would include like ADHD, neurodiversity, those sorts of things. These findings were statistically significant. So even when they accounted for gender and race and birth weight and premature birth, respiratory distress, trauma at birth, all that sort of stuff, this was still significantly significant. So overall, the vaccinated children were 2.5 times more likely to be diagnosed with a chronic health condition versus those who were unvaccinated. So we know that there's definitely a risk of some sort of chronic health issue, right? Unfortunately, again, that study was not published. There is a very well-known journalist. His name is Dr. Toby Rogers, and he, you know, basically concluded he had a partner that had a son that was diagnosed with autism. He ended up changing his PhD dissertation to I believe it was the political economy of autism. And it was like the most downloaded doctoral paper. It was like in the top 10
Mhm.
downloaded doctoral paper for his university. So it was obviously pretty popular for a number of reasons.
Yeah.
So basically what he found was that this was another really well-designed study. It showed that 88% of autism cases were characterized by what they call autistic regression, which means the child was developing normally and then suddenly lost eye contact. They stopped speaking. They stopped the ability to connect and socialize with others. And this suggests basically an acute exposure, and based on thousands of patients or parents basically testifying that this regression happened after a well check, including a vaccine, where a vaccine was administered. So that's a huge, huge percentage of children that were normally developing that, witnessed that autistic regression. So the best evidence available, again, with a lot of these studies, suggests that, anything that causes immune activation, so whether it's infectious disease, industrial toxicants, or vaccine, can lead to what we call neural developmental disorders or autism. So, anyway, that Henry Ford study that I brought up with 18,000 children was actually brought up during a Senate hearing, and talked about vastly. Again, this is in that inconvenient study where you can learn more. But I just want to talk maybe a little bit about, okay, so we know that based on a bunch of studies, the risk of chronic disease, no matter what that is, neurological or, asthma, whatever, increases significantly with vaccination. Um, what's in the vaccines, right?
Yeah.
Which we've talked about maybe a little bit before. But, I just want to revisit it because there are some things that I feel like are worth revisiting. Obviously, the contaminants in the vaccine are there's lots of things in there that I probably wouldn't want to inject into, my child. If you look at it, of course, again, there's risk benefit ratio, right? There's always a risk benefit. But I do want to say, so in the 80s, the manufacturers of vaccines were being sued for a lot of money because of vaccine injuries. And they basically said to the government, like, we can't afford to produce these vaccines because of the liability. And so what happened is the government did away with all liability for vaccine manufacturers. So no one could sue any of the vaccine manufacturers for any sort of vaccine, quote unquote, injury. They created this kind of board where you could go and bring up your cases of vaccine injury. They created this, I guess, what is it? I don't even know what they would call it, if it was an agency or what, where they could go and present their findings and get awarded, basically compensation if they feel like they had been injured by a vaccine. But they could not sue the pharmacological companies making the vaccines. So that by itself, inherently, my radar sort of goes up when the government has to go as far to, say like there's no ramifications, right, for vaccines for these companies. Why is that, right? Also, why was the safety or the lack thereof not talked about for patients, for to the parents of these children? When you walk into, a well visit, they ask, of course, we're going to vaccinate today, but I don't know how many pediatricians, and maybe one will get a hold of this, how really go through actually the side effects or the potential of side effects. Maybe some do. I don't. Right.
Yeah, possibly.
I don't know. And I don't want to say that none of them do, because maybe some of them do.
Right.
I digress. So back to the ingredients. I think the big ones we sort of know about, formaldehyde being one of them. It's, obviously an industrial toxin. And it can be very damaging neurologically. Formaldehyde, aluminum is probably another one that we hear a lot about. This is the one, actually, too, that we see a lot in hair analysis. It's pretty pervasive, not just in vaccine, but I would say in the environment. Do you agree?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
So these adjuvants, let me back up for 1 second, are what causes the immune response. So a lot of times, if there's an attenuated virus or a piece of the bacteria, if they would inject that into the body, the immune system would not respond, right?
Mm-hmm.
First of all, none of us are exposed to these bacteria, viruses, whatever, via injection. None of us. Nothing is directly injected into our bloodstream. That's just not naturally how we would acquire or be exposed to them. We would be exposed to them through the nasal passages, through the mouth, any orifice, eyes. That's how we would, our hands to our mouth, how we would obtain the inoculation, quote unquote. I know a lot of parents, who chose not to vaccinate. I have a friend he's actually an orthopedic surgeon. He chose to vaccinate for polio, but he used an oral inoculation. So, which is the normal route, right? Nothing is injected into the bloodstream. So that's number one. Number two is these adjuvants have to be present in order to get to the immune response. So aluminum. Now, they're safe for the most part that the mercury, the thimerosal has been produced, or production has gotten it out. That's not totally true. While they take it out of a lot of the vaccines, if you look at the parts per million of the ethyl mercury in a lot of these vaccines, it's higher than what the EPA deems as safe. So it's sometimes 3 or 4 times the amount of deemed safe ethyl mercury. So it is definitely something that you don't want to be injecting. Not to mention, sometimes they use fetal cell lines in a lot of the vaccine production. So there's ethical consideration for faith-based families, for sure.
Yeah.
And then other preservatives, polysorbitol 80. There's a couple others. So these are all something that, again, without these, the vaccine doesn't have its full effect, meaning getting the immune system to respond.
Yeah. So, I just think about how many vaccines have been added to the schedule. That's another
That's a
thing
good
that you really
subject. Yeah, let's
can't
talk about
deny.
that. What is it now? Is it like 72, 74?
It's somewhere between 70 and 80, and
Yes.
I didn't actually go count the number. But that's something that should be concerning to everybody, right?
Right.
Like, okay, I think you can take vaccine by vaccine and justify some, do different routes, like you're saying of some, but it's the fact that there are so many at even prior to 5, right? Like, you probably get the majority of those prior to 4 or 5. Your body's just not like a child's body is not that equipped to really detox what it
Detoxify.
needs to detox. And also they give multiple vaccines at one time, which is concerning also. That's relatively new. They started that, probably 15 years ago, really combining these vaccines because there were so many. So they didn't have to give so many shots. And that definitely is also concerning, and something to look into for sure as you're
Yeah.
making these decisions.
Right. Right. Yes. The number of vaccines has gone up significantly.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And they start with a vaccine, hepatitis B, at birth. So within hours of being born, you're giving a blood-borne pathogen vaccine. So, hepatitis B is usually contracted via IV drug use or sexual contact. So I just don't understand the reasoning why a baby would need that, because they're not an IV drug user and they're not sexually active. So there's just some vaccines that you can sort of see, like, are they appropriate for this age? Do they need them? Does it make sense? Um, and
Yeah.
are you
Some of
comfortable?
this is literally just common sense,
Right,
really, if you think about it. Like, that really doesn't make sense. I
right,
think sometimes, it's made to be this big topic that's all-consuming, that's so complicated and, but honestly, some of it is common sense.
right. Um, and if you look at some of we were talking about the system that they created when they made the liability zero for some of these companies. It's the National Vaccine Injury Compensation Program, and it's paid out over almost $5 billion in vaccine injuries. And let me say, they're not really loosey-goosey handing out that money.
No. So it probably should be like 3 times that, or
Right,
more.
right, right. And again, I understand that there are risks with things like measles and polio and diphtheria, all those sorts of things. So it is very much a personal decision. We're just encouraging you um, to look at the risk versus benefit ratio. Um, and is it possible to support these kids through? For me, it was. But I also worked in the industry. I had a lot of people that, I could talk to and reference. But, my kids were able to do really well on just nutrition and homeopathic remedies, staying well. That I've never taken my kids to a sick visit because I could manage at home. Now, I realize that's not the case for everybody. I really do.
Sure.
Um, but I just want you to know it's possible, right?
Right.
The
I
body
think
is
that's
an
not talked
innate
about a lot,
No, the body is
right?
an innate healing machine. We're so afraid of fevers and diarrhea and rashes, and that's the body doing what it's supposed to do,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Also, if you look at, I know some of the arguments are because of vaccination, a lot of these diseases have fallen short. If you actually look at the statistics, because of better sanitation, because of sewage systems, a lot of these disease rates fell off significantly before any of the vaccines were even released or started what they call
Yeah.
immunization. And it was simply because of better, hygiene and sanitation.
Yeah.
So that's not really something. I think it's talked about, but it's not really discussed. If you look at the true data on some of that, you would be actually shocked.
Right. Yeah. So, we've given you some things to think about. We'll definitely put a lot of this information in the show notes, the links that we have, etc. I think it's really important to not be scared to ask questions, though. I think we're really, that's the question that I get. Like, what do I even say to my pediatrician? What do I say to my family members that might be, wanting me to do something different? First and foremost, we would encourage you to pray. Pray about it. Pray for discernment. Pray for wisdom, and just realize that these are your children, and you get to make decisions for them. Right? You don't have to put their health always in somebody else's hands. Sure, it's great to get different opinions and whatnot, but at the end of the day, you don't necessarily have to do some of the things that are, quite like you think might be required. You can just say no. You could just pass, and you don't have to have an explanation.
Yeah, there's lots of exemptions in many states now.
Yeah,
philosophical, religious, and
right.
health-related exemptions. I know here in Ohio we have all three. I don't know about Georgia. Do you know what the exemption?
I just always do a religious exemption.
Yes.
I really haven't looked super into it because that has worked for us, and
Right.
so
We'll we'll attach a copy of an affidavit that I've used throughout the kids' school life. Basically just, asking for an exemption. So it's an affidavit. I initially got it notarized. I don't think it depends on the state probably, but I don't get it notarized. I got it notarized the very first time,
Yeah.
but that was it. So I've used it for every institution. I would suggest that you attach a copy of the law with that for your state, and you can easily find that online. And I've always done that, attach a copy of the law highlighting the exemptions.
Mhm.
It's not a must, but I just always included it.
Yeah. So we hope that you feel not more confused, but hopefully encouraged, empowered with more information. And just, you know, again, pray, discern for yourself, ask more questions. You can ask us questions if you have questions. We wanted to open this conversation up because we welcome your questions if you have them. We want to try and point you to more information or however we can help. So reach out if you if you have questions after this or comments or whatnot. We're more than happy to answer those. And we hope this was helpful. I know that this is a really big burden for a lot of moms because maybe they feel a certain way and their husband feels a different way, or they can just, I don't know. They actually, I think, are having discernment that they don't necessarily want to go this route, but they don't know how to go about that. And I understand that can be very, it can just be a lot. So if you need prayer, if you need more help, please reach out to us. And we hope that you've enjoyed this episode. We'll see you on the next one.
If this episode has served you in any way, drop a review wherever you listen to podcasts. We'd love it if you'd share any aha moments or takeaways on Instagram and tag us at Cornerstone Integrative Healing.
And if you haven't already hit the subscribe button, please do so. We want to continue to walk this journey with you. Until next time, friends, know that we're praying for you.